Hi everyone, it's Philip here, and you will have noted my particular interest in the Stage 3 moving to Stage 4 faith journey. Maybe I've not really shared that particularly well. The reason is very clear to me. It's because a lot of people get stuck in Stage 3. I think it's an indication of a lot of things. One of the things probably being that we don't talk about the stages of faith very much. It's not a common subject within churches that I'm aware of. And there are all sorts of other reasons that relate to what it means to be human and in our particular age and time, and some of those things I've explored a little bit recently, and I guess it's my hope in putting these out as YouTube clips is that it gives a chance for this kind of conversation to happen, even if it's not happening within churches generally. At least there's a place where some of this stuff can be discussed, and there are great resources around. And I'm probably not a great resource, but at least I can kickstart the conversation for you. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about today, which I think relates in particular to our societal issue, something that kind of relates to particularly our time, and that has to do with the effect of being graded on your faith journey and on your development as a human generally, because those two things really do go together. We are quite... We're very much in love with being graded. Love it or loathe it may be. It's certainly a great joy to receive an A, and perhaps if you've been really trying very hard and you receive, say, a C, it's a pass mark, but you might not be as excited by that. It might be a bit of a blow. But the impact of that grade, we're all aware of it. We're aware of the need for grades, or at least we assume there's a need for grades because grades are such a prominent part of our lives. Such a prominent part of our education system, such a prominent part of even within workplaces where people are given bonuses or raises or whatever according to how they're ranked against one another, and there'll be some criteria for that. So we are familiar with being graded, but it's not that it's not an ancient practice. It's a relatively new one. Certainly, the ancient Greeks, when they were teaching one another in the universities, weren't being graded. They didn't get an A or a B and a C. That just wasn't in place then. So it's a relatively new phenomenon, but there's a lot of pushback now against the idea of being graded. There's a couple of things that are happening that mean grades probably are more counterproductive than productive. Now, let's accept first of all that the best outcome for education is that someone would love to learn, would develop a lifelong love of learning and of challenging themselves and growing and so on. Well, it's probably intrinsic to a human being to love challenge, to want to grow. I think there's something in our nature, our natural curiosity, our natural intelligence, our natural desire to explore the world that means we don't need to go to school to learn to love learning. It's probably where we learn to hate learning. And I suspect that might be the case with churches as well. I think that when people are touched by God, they love to get to know Him. They would love to draw near to Him. And yet it might be that in churches, that natural love and desire might get stifled. And I certainly know as well that when I did a little bit of theological study, there is that comment that gets passed that, be careful that you don't lose your faith, because it's been observed by many that it does happen that young people going to theological college, Bible college, go in enthusiastic and come out doubting, come out with big questions. They come out looking like they've lost their faith. Now, it might not be that they've lost their faith at all, and I've probably discussed some of this sort of stuff before. And I don't think it has anything to do with grading in that specific situation. I think it has a lot more to do with the teaching you get in a church would tend to be quite narrow and tribalistic, and would be quite dogmatic about, well, this is what we believe about heaven and hell, this is what we believe about creation, this is what we believe about, etc., etc., etc. And you go to a Bible college, and if they're any good, what they'll show you, or at least a theological school, what they'll show you is there are lots of different ways of thinking about those issues, not just the one you've been served in your local church. So when people go from a local church to a theological seminary, they get exposed to lots of ideas lots more thinking, and it can blow them out of the water a bit. It normally ends, well, it can end very well. But the observation of some for whom faith means sticking to those very dogmatic ideas, it can look like the person they sent to college has lost their faith. But sticking to dogmatic ideas isn't really faith. Faith isn't a project of certainty and securing for yourself your own security. That's not what faith is. Faith is a journey toward a place you might not reach, as it was said in Hebrews, right? The great heroes of faith lived looking ahead to a time that they wouldn't see, building for a city that they would never reach. That sounds to me like they weren't looking for certainty or security, but they were constantly on the move, heading in a direction they believed to be the right one, and building and nurturing something that wouldn't be theirs to inherit, but would have to be passed on down and down and down the ages, which, that sounds to me like faith. Not the kind of thing of, well, this is our dogmatic view on these things, hold to that and you'll be fine. That's not faith, but it is part of the faith journey. So that's where you get to in stage 3 anyway. You get to that point of dogmatism, which has been helpful, and then it becomes unhelpful. It becomes, a dogmatic view on issues. The more it is exposed to lots of different views and opinions, whether it be even just within, as I was saying, within your own faith set, to realize that people see these issues very differently from you, kind of cracks you open a little bit, and you think, okay, so what do I do with that? Do I retreat to my little local church and what it believes, or as if even your little local church might not have a huge diversity of belief in lots of areas anyway, which I suspect is true. What is shared from the pulpit is not always what is believed in the pews. Do you retreat to the certainty of the dogmatism of your early stage 3, position, or do you begin to allow questions to bubble up? Do you allow yourself and others to hold up to the spotlight this belief or that belief and say, well, let's say I'm never going to change my mind. Am I at least willing to accept that there might be different opinions on it, and that some of those opinions might be well-founded, have a great case to be made, and again, I may not decide to change my mind, but I'm willing to accept that other Christians of good moral fibre have these different views, and I can accept them, and I can accept in all humility that I may be wrong. I'm probably not, but I may be wrong, and they may be right. They're probably not, but they may be, and therefore there's room and space for us all. I'm being a little bit cheeky there, of course. But you can see the journey, right? You can see what would naturally happen in someone who just grows up and experiences more of life and more of other people, and has a bit of humility about them, and realizes when they get to know people that, okay, you're not a complete fool. You've come to your position having reflected on a few things. We may disagree, but I can accept the fact that yours is a well-held and with integrity issue, and I'm not about to cause division over the fact that we have a difference of opinion here. That's just a maturing. That's just growing up. But it does represent risk, and risk is a major factor when it comes to the faith journey. It's one of those things that we have to grapple with as we journey, as we grow up. There is risk in the faith journey. There is risk in growing up. There's risk in growing up generally, and we have to learn how to cope with risk and to navigate it in order to achieve good outcomes. But we can't avoid it. Being risk avoidant is counterproductive, because you just create new problems. Anyway, what I was really wanting to go after, and what have I got left? Just a few minutes. It's the issue of grading. And when I was young, I was raised in a family of readers, and I wasn't a natural reader though. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and all of my family read, but I didn't, and I was a little bit of a late bloomer as far as my family's concerned, and when reading. I began to read because everyone else was reading. It was the culture I was raised in, and grew to love it. And now I'm besotted with it. I love to read. I'm always reading. And it used to be fiction was the main diet, but now it's mostly learning things. I'm constantly looking for and like to be exposed to new ideas. So that's what I love. Now, research on the impact of grading on our desire to learn shows that it has two particular effects. The first is, let's say my parents notice that I've begun to read and say to me, okay, Philip, that's wonderful. You're at last reading. We'd like to take you out for an ice cream and go to the movies. So they wanted to reward the behavior. Now, this sounds like really good stuff, right? It's the kind of, not necessarily grading per se, but it's a recognition and a reward for the behavior, which in some ways is what grading is about. But moving on. Now, here's what happens to me, having read that book and realized that my parents thought, Philip, we accept that reading's not much fun, that you've had to grind it out to get through it. It's the thing that we do here, but what you didn't realize, the secret to this was the only way we can keep reading is if we keep rewarding ourselves for the books that we've read. So we're always going to the movies and getting ice creams when we've read a book, because it's such it's a difficult thing to do. There's no reward in reading itself. You need to get the rewards at the end to keep going. So that's the message. And again, I'm not making this up. This is what the research shows, that if you are given an external reward for a thing, like reading or learning generally, it belittles the experience. What it says to you is that there's no intrinsic reward, that you need to be supplemented, or if there is some benefit from reading or from learning, it needs to be supplemented by lots of other rewards so that you'll continue with it, because there's not enough joy in the process for you to carry on. Now, it's obvious and evident to me that there's plenty of reward in reading itself. I don't need a certificate. I don't need an ice cream or to go to the movies when I've read a book. I love to read, and I don't need to be incentivized for it. All the reward is intrinsic to the experience. Now, so the first thing is if we reward or grade for behaviors, it robs us of the intrinsic reward. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit leery about being too overt about quite some time ago, our church put on a volunteers supper. We wanted to reward the volunteers around the church. Now, it's at the point probably we would be giving something to everyone, because everyone contributes. But what I'm concerned about now, and have been for a while, is that service is an intrinsically rewarding experience. It's better to give than to get. And if that's true, then the people who learn to give will find that it truly is rewarding in and of itself, intrinsic reward. And if I were to give someone a certificate for doing something that they loved doing anyway, I've actually belittled their experience and cheapened it. I've said to them, I know that you did that and you said that you enjoyed doing it, but it's probably not true, is it? Service sucks, and you needed this certificate so that it was valuable, and you needed me to pat you on the back and say, well done, because without that, you just feel like you were being used. Well, it's not like that. Anyone who really serves with a good heart is getting far more out of that experience than had they been given a certificate at the end of it. That would have cheapened it for them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if you feel like your performance is, you're going to be graded on your performance. So in this case, my parents say to me, Philip, we will take you out to the movies and give you an ice cream if you read a book. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find the easiest book, the shortest book, a book that does not challenge me, a book I know I can read and get finished. I'm going to choose that book as the book I'm going to read so that I can get to the movie and ice cream. I don't want to push myself. I don't want to risk not getting the movie and ice cream by choosing a book that's too hard to read or too long or whatever. I am going to make it as easy as possible to get the grade. So putting grades on learning means we won't challenge ourselves. We don't risk. We don't push ourselves. We don't go to areas where we're not sure we can come back with the best performance possible. Now, you apply that to faith. Not only is the faith journey intrinsically rewarding, it's an incredible journey for the soul to be a servant within a church, as Christ calls us to be, is intrinsically rewarding. Now, I'm grateful that I get a salary for that, because if I didn't, I couldn't do it to the degree I do it, because I simply wouldn't be able to have the time. I am able, by the sacrifice of my church, to put my whole day into thinking about faith issues. And that's an incredible gift. But I don't see the salary as a reward for that. I see it as enabling it so that I can do the things that I love doing. The reward is in doing the work. The reward is in doing this kind of stuff. I love this. And if the church said, so there's intrinsic reward in it. The other part of it is, it's kind of where the heaven and hell thing comes in for me, is if we say to people, the only value in being a Christian is A, escaping hell, or B, getting to heaven. What it will do for us typically is it will mean we won't risk anything in faith. We won't risk asking dangerous questions. We won't risk opening ourselves up to other ideas that we might think create in us, make us heretics or whatever. We won't become risk takers in faith. We'll do what happens to students in learning if they are afraid of losing the best grade possible. We will do what we know we can already do, and we will just continue to do that over and over again. And I think that's why a lot of us get stuck in stage 3. We think that we are being graded by God. We think that it's our performance that He is looking for that will mean that we whether we get to heaven or hell, and it causes us in us a fear of moving, and a fear of risking, and a fear of going to places that the Lord might want to take us, out of a fear of losing the rewards. And it's having a massive counterproductive thing. But if someone said to you, because it's Christ's performance that we can stand before God spotless and blameless, right? It's not your performance, it's His performance. It means you stand before Him spotless and blameless. That pretty much means you can do, in a way, whatever you want to do to follow Him as best you believe you can follow Him. So that if the Lord says, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and you with some discernment around that, I know we can be a bit crazy, but with some discernment around that, we might actually risk doing something that we're not sure we could actually come through on. That we think, I'm not sure if I'm really going to be, a good missionary. Let's do that classic one. I feel like the Lord's sending me to India, but I think I'm going to be an awful missionary. I just don't think I've got the characteristic for it, or whatever. Well, if God says that's what you should do, and He places that on your heart, and other people say, yeah, I agree with that, then your only recourse left is to take the risk and to trust the Lord knows better than you what you can do. But that's and in some ways it's a really bad example, because the things that I really want to be talking about, as it were, when it comes to risking faith, it's not really whether we go to Africa or India or whatever as a missionary. It's got a lot more to do with the openness of our hearts to one another and to others. It's more to do with, in our early stages of faith, we have very firm boundaries about the who's in and who's out kind of stuff. And the journey of faith is very much like, Jesus, who surrounded Himself with tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes and all the difficult people of His society. The Pharisees kept themselves apart from that because they were too good. They were holy. They did not want to get tainted by all these bad people. But Jesus was right there in the mix because, of course, He was the most spiritually mature. But we're so afraid of losing our status with God, of being dragged down by people and situations and being caught up in stuff that we're afraid of, that we don't risk things with and for God. And I know we shouldn't be taking risks on behalf of God if He hasn't asked us to. But I'm also sure that we are not taking risks because we're so afraid of losing His favour, of not performing to a standard that would get us an A grade or whatever, that it's holding us back and keeping us stuck. And there's a lot of Christians stuck because they're just too afraid to move. I can tell you, as I've already said, and this comes straight out of Scripture, because of Christ, you are holy and blameless in His sight. There is nothing that can separate you from His love. He is the author and perfecter of your faith, not you. So just trust Him. Faith is trust and risk. God bless. See you soon. Lots more to be said, and maybe we'll say it. Bye.